All right, guys, welcome back to another episode. Today I have Jodi with me. Dr. Ed could not join us. Jodi was, and I've been working with Jodi now for a few years. Time is a
Yeah,
blur. You were in one of the first podcasts, and you've gone now to two movement ayahuascas. And so today I kind of wanted to focus in a little bit on your experience on the first one, on the second one, the work that you've done through, between each one and what you're currently working on. And yeah, just kind of have you share your experience.
awesome. Yeah. I think we've been working together, I think 3 years. And
3 years.
then, yeah, two movement ayahuascas and I think a total of four gauntlets, maybe a couple more to come.
I love it.
Not that I'm counting. And yeah, countless swamis and yeah, all sorts of fun stuff. So,
All of the good things. So,
yeah.
for people that aren't aware of what Movement Ayahuasca is, it's a retreat that I started. Essentially, we take proper movement, stress, intensity, active meditation, and breath work, and we kind of combine it and curate it to get people to get greater awareness of who they truly are, where they are in life, and forward behavioral cycles, or maybe how they experience or see the world and observe the world, and if they want to make changes on them, right? So I can't make the changes happen. The whole point of Movement Ayahuasca is that we start to give you the tools and what you need in order to create the changes. Otherwise, that would be awesome. So I wanted to start with really quick, what kind of drew you to sign up for Movement Ayahuasca, and what was the what kind of really pushed you over the edge to go, okay, I'm going to do this retreat and kind of be open to see what happens.
Yeah, I think, I was at a place in my life where there was not a lot, I was really stuck, a lot of negative self talk, negative energy, really just not feeling there was any like joy in life. And I think that was when I originally had reached out to you and we started working together. And I think um, I there was even just so much little progress kind of in the first couple months, just starting to incorporate the movement with a different intention. And then adding in, I think, additionally, some of like the breath work and the nasal breathing and kind of calming the nervous system down was important. So I think I was missing that balance. So I was working out with a trainer, still do. Shout out to Greg, but I was missing that part of the down regulation. And I had a lot of what I thought at the time was just unresolved issues, some traumas that I was trying to continue to work through, and stress. And the hope going into the first movement ayahuasca, I think, was certainly to be able to really, I'd made a lot of progress, but once and for all, like try to kind of unload some of that burden or baggage. And that
Yeah.
was kind of my expectation going in. Like we had made a lot of progress in terms of I remember my first expression doing bear crawls and like having like this huge emotional release and breakthrough and like just wanting to continue to do more of that work and see kind of what came out of it. I think the, the biggest driver was again just when you start feeling a shift, you want to find more of the shift and see kind of like how far you'll go. But going into that first one, I really didn't know what to expect. It's hard to articulate, I think.
Yeah. People always ask me, give me the 15-second elevator pitch. And it's a hard one to come into because it's always about just kind of working with whoever's coming in, and we have that first initial talk, and then based on how you are feeling on that in that moment is really going to kind of guide the rest of the trip, right? And the movements, the exercises, and all of the fun things. So we had our first initial talk in Cabo, and then the next morning you get your notebook with the gauntlet. For you guys out there that don't know what the gauntlet is, I always like to keep it vague because I think it's always a fun mystery for people to open up their notebook on their first day and thinking it's going to be breathing and relaxation and getting awareness, and then they see close to 5,000 repetitions. So, can you talk to me kind of what, recall as much as you can how that first day felt? And let's go from like the first retreat and then kind of going into that second retreat and already having a sort of an understanding and an expectation.
Yeah,
on
for
the
sure.
second time?
I think I did have a little bit of an advantage because I had failed, or I had quit one gauntlet. So we did one. You had given me one sort of pre ayahuasca homework,
That's right.
and I remember like it telling you like, oh, I got 4 reps, I got 4 rounds in, and you were like, then you didn't do it. Like that's not how this works. I had, some expectation, but I do remember like looking, getting that the first day. And again, I came in with what I thought would be a lot of like sadness to kind of alleviate and express. And I remember immediately recognizing when I opened that the first day that it was probably more anger, because when I looked at it, it felt
There's
like it was
a
going
lot
to
of
be,
anger there.
yeah, like it was going to be really hard. And I was like, what is he doing? Like he knows all this stuff I've been through. And this feels like a lot and really mean. And, I was trying to like rationalize it and talk myself out of it and all kinds of stuff. Like, I can't do this. Like, this is cruel. But, so just, and then obviously you get into it. And I think somewhere around, round 4, it just starts to kick in where it's kind of like you can do this, and you start sort of finding the motivation to keep going. I remember in Cabo going through the gauntlet and being really kind of this huge sense of accomplishment at the end and this huge sense of relief. Like I felt like a lighter human. And I think, especially having one that I had quit and then having one where I fought through that. So it is around round 4 for me, where it's like, this is really
Right.
hard. This is awful. It becomes a chore. And for me, especially being able to push through that level of discomfort to get to the next round, then I will get these rushes of like accomplishment and empowerment and all the kind of good feelings. And then I followed that up with probably the best nap of my life to this date.
Yeah. A well deserved.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, like I said, I didn't expect the level of anger that I was going through my head, and like I felt like I was actually like discharging that. And I know now, that's actually really common. Like suppression of emotions can lead to depression. I didn't,
Right.
in my head, that was not the way that it worked. So being able to release that and then gain that perspective right there in that moment was pretty awesome. And is the gauntlet, I can't remember, is that the first day or did we
That's the
do,
first day. Yeah.
yeah. So I thought I wasn't going to have anything left for the next day, which is truly an expression session, but I sure found a lot, a lot more the next day as well to express.
Yeah. Beautiful. The first gauntlet, and then I think you did one in between the first one and second retreats, but then we got into I think you came into the second retreat like you're the hot shot because you'd already done this, and you're like, I know what's going to happen. We can do this. But I switched it up on you.
That's exactly right. You made me lose my mind. Like, because I think I did 2 actually in between. After Cabo was like a really tough time because my father passed away. Like he got very, very
Mhm.
sick right before going to Cabo. And that was, I think, at the end of March. And then by June 1st, he had passed away. So it was all kind of like sudden. So we did a gauntlet session shortly after that. And then I think like one more even in between. So I was feeling super confident going into the second one because exactly like you said, I'm like, I've got this. I've now like completed 3. Like I'm a pro at this. And I remember somebody actually, I think it was Telly, asking me, I can't believe you signed up to do another one, another gauntlet. And I was like, I didn't even think about that until the plane ride here because like again I was so confident, but you changed it up on me. So not only did you add an entire extra exercise, I got one more than everybody else, but we split it. So it was in, instead of doing like all the rounds like as one thing, you split it. So it was like do these 4 exercises times 7 rounds and then do these 3 times 7 rounds. And that already like started messing with my head because I couldn't strategize. Like I couldn't use like the same, I felt like I couldn't go in it with the same like mentality. It felt super overwhelming because it felt like that was way more reps. And again, that's that lack of self confidence. And then you threw in bicep curls, which like made me just lose it because never, and I'm sure like you can speak to maybe like the emotional components of this, but for me, like bicep curls weren't anything we had done in any of our programming, training. It wasn't any like I had no like experience. I couldn't practice them ahead of time. You know what I mean? So I remember just losing my mind. The negative self talk, the doubt, the self anger just like came flooding in. And I remember you walking up and you're like, what's going on? As I'm like pacing around, crying, like irrationally crying. I think I was using a 15-pound kettlebell and it was just too much for one arm, especially I think my left. And you're like, just use both hands.
The answer is right there.
And it's like that moment where it's like I just, something so simple, but in my head, like I was just too busy beating myself up for not being able to do 100 repetitions of 15-pound bicep curls
Right.
with each arm. So I really just distinctly remember that. But that I didn't realize that moment was what needed to shift. And, similarly in the first movement ayahuasca, I had a moment where the beliefs were coming to the top that needed to shift, but I didn't know in that moment that that was what needed to shift and what would shift later. So like
Right.
I tie, and we'll talk about these two like experiences I've had since where suddenly all of that made sense and I understood that not only was that telling me what needed to be worked on, but that it had. Like I came out a changed person with new beliefs. And it took
Right.
9 or 10 months to kind of figure that out.
Yeah, it's always I always use this analogy of your affirmation won't necessarily change your belief system. It's a falsification. And I think that the movement, and for you those bicep curls, the stress of that movement and the effort that's required to complete that movement where you can't just zone out, it's forcing a rewrite of the belief system. And a belief system takes a while for it to take place. It's not like you know this is why the gauntlet is the ego killer, because I'm finding the gaps that your body uses constantly to justify, to quit, to go back to whatever's comfortable. And so for me, my job in being, the movement shaman, or the person that's guiding you guys through the retreat, is making sure that I can find these gaps. And so that's what I use the initial meditative walks in our talks before we actually go into the movement part, and then Swami, to see how the body's holding on to stress. That tells me a whole lot of the role that I need to play for you in that training session. So whether it's, you know, with you, I was just somebody kind of showing you the way, but not giving you the answers. And then for somebody else, I'm that little brother that comes in and just kind of annoys you. And then for others, I'm just there to kind of hold them and give them a hug for a little bit. And they go, okay, come on, toughen up, and let's keep on moving. And so it's about finding these gaps so that you can come to the realization yourself of how you've been essentially behaving through life or reacting to stress in life when it gets overwhelming. If you want to go into a little bit of your backstory, but you're extremely accomplished, and you've done so much. And like when we first started our conversations of what you've gone through, I'm like, how in the hell? I'm like, here I am complaining, and you've gone through all of this, and you're still getting PhDs and studies, and I'm like, where do you even have the time? So but it's that belief system that you kind of start to pull yourself into, that makes you have the limiting, your limiting belief factor, that how you view yourself or how you view the environment, period. And so we need the physical stress to reground us so that we can go, oh, it's actually not that difficult. And now we can go up towards that belief or that religious belief system that you have of how you see the world and actually make the change. And that's the importance of having 1,000 repetitions and something that you've never experienced before in order to bring up that level of grounding so that you can go, okay, well, if I can do it this way, then it's the same thing that I can do everywhere else in life. And that's where we start to create the changes for the future.
Yeah. Very frustrating, by the way, not having you tell me what to do. Like just the guiding without giving me the answers was very frustrating
Yeah,
because, I mean, for obvious reasons. Like, but that's definitely a pattern in my life, right? I would follow tracks that other people probably told me I should or ought to be on that weren't necessarily in line with, a lot of the work that we did was really starting to help to figure out what I actually want or what my true nature is so that I could start aligning my life towards those types of goals. And I wasn't doing
right.
that. And so it was really frustrating because I very much wanted you to say, okay, this is what you do. And then you'll be able to get, here. And that wasn't the case, for obviously good reason, but
Yeah.
very
Well,
frustrating.
yeah, I think that, especially we've grown up in a culture where you're just kind of always being guided as to what's a pass, what's a fail. Everything's objectified almost of where that path needs to go. And when there is no path and you have to create your own, that's really where the work begins and that's where the reward happens. And, within movement ayahuasca and all the training is we're taking movement to show you how you behave and how you react to stress and what are the changes that need to be made because otherwise you kind of get stuck in a certain path where it'll be the same redundancies happening, and that's where how you behave with the movement is the same way you're going to behave when a job interview comes up or entrepreneurship happens or any sort of hardship. That's the power and the value of proper movement.
Yeah. I
So
think I,
let's yeah.
well, I was going to say, like, and that definitely showed me, and I was always afraid to get to a certain level of intensity. So I would
Yeah.
stop. I would get to a point where I'd be like, okay, this feels good. But as my heart rate would go up and I would start to hit these like walls of intensity, I would immediately either turn around, find some rational thought to quit, or like try to just tone it down so that I can endure it without getting like too uncomfortable. So I was really afraid to hit those levels of intensity, which I think is
Yeah.
part of why like that I quit that first gauntlet, because I was like, okay, well now I'm tired. I didn't have enough, carbs, or I over intellectualized it versus like being there where it was helpful to have like more of that in-person guidance, I think, to help find the intensity in a safe place, because I knew that
Right.
it was going to be okay. And that to me was one of the first kind of like pivotal movements, is really getting to that place of that intensity without feeling like I've got to like run away.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, well, there was nowhere to run away to.
Right.
I think that's maybe we can jump into that, but it's always funny because everybody kind of finds their own space when we do the gauntlet and they kind of have their own little bubble, but you're kind of watching everybody do it. So it's always from an outside perspective, watching the people that are trying to pace with others. And, it's supposed to be about you and for you, but still, you still find kind of ways to try and you're trying to make it about the exercise, not about what you're doing in the exercise. And so that's why sometimes, it's interesting to watch. And the first one, I think you were trying to pace with somebody, weren't you? I think I remember watching, and you kept kind of looking over, and then eventually you realized there was like just you, and then you kind of turned away from everybody so you could just focus on you,
Yeah. And that was probably
right?
around round 4. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So it's always interesting. So let's get into some Swami talk. So we've done lots of Swami. I think it's one of the most effective ways to create awareness of how your body's holding on to stress. What are things that can, kind of help you down regulate so you can up regulate even more as far as the nervous system goes and actually do more things. It's always something that people seem to stop doing the quickest when they're left to their own vices. But the Swami, I think, in movement ayahuasca and the experience of having the whole group together, because there's this sort of magnetic field and this energy that kind of gets put into play when you're kind of all connected and breathing and oscillating together. And we've played around with that a little bit. What has been your most interesting Swami session that you've had during the retreats?
Yeah, I mean, for sure, it was in Croatia on that the last one that we did outside. You know, the weather, like that was just wild for a lot of reasons because the weather all of a sudden like it was like sunny and then it got like super dark for a minute and then it like became really sunny again.
There
You
were
could
waves
feel
that happened.
waves happening. And for me, like that was the first one where it actually brought me like laughter. Like I remember just childlike joy and laughter out of nowhere. I can't even like explain what that was like. And I've never, my swamis had always been more of a sad, like a sad, like crying, like lots of tears coming out. The first one, even in Croatia, was really emotional, like just like sobbing. So then fast forward 4 days, 5 days, and I'm just laughing hysterically out of nowhere, seeing different chakra colors, like all of that. I mean, it was so cool. That was definitely the most unique experience. And I think
Yeah,
like to a detriment because even the sad ones, you feel that it's this cathartic release. And so I think sometimes, I mean, I even told you afterwards, like, you know, you get to a point where you kind of want to chase these emotional expressions. So like
right.
doing some where it's just not a lot's happening, you're just breathing, like it was harder for me to get back to that because I wanted these like big experiences, you know?
Right. Yeah, you think that that's the objective, that you start to the measurement of success has become the objective. And that's where we start to lose interest because each one is unique. And again, if you're really well connected and you've already expressed a lot and you have a new belief system, you have a new way to look at the world, it's why would you want to go back to where you're crying and sad? You've overcome that, right? And the point of Swami is to bring the awareness, to have a little bit of an expression or some form of expression or change, but then to really solidify that we need to have the physical intensity. So that's why we always do Swami and then we go into movement. I think that's where some people forget that you need to have the movement part to really kind of instill that change that you were able to express during the Swami session.
Yeah. And what I've noticed since though, kind of taking the objective out of that, that's been really helpful though, is I will notice there's times where I am doing it where I'm feeling like there is some emotion that's stuck. And usually if I feel something more like in my stomach region, I tend to realize there's just some anxiety. So I probably just need to do like more of an expression type session or something that's a little bit more like, you know, able to release some of that extra energy. But there's been
Yeah,
a handful of times now that I've put together where I'll actually feel some tension, like a lump in my throat. And usually after thinking about that, I'm like, oh, this is actually something I need to verbally express to somebody. Like there's
right,
situations where I have not been speaking like my piece or saying something that needs to be said to somebody. And this has happened 3 times now where it's like I really wasn't aware of how much something was bothering me, but I would do the Swami session. I would immediately notice I've got like some stuck emotion, some tension in my throat. And every single time afterwards, I've been able to say, you know what, this is because I haven't said this to this person, and I needed to verbally express or like diffuse a situation. So that's been like a really good insight that I've been getting recently from it, like
yeah,
that understanding.
yeah. It's always hard to put into a short sentence or elevator pitch, but it's the body is just communicating with you. It's whether you want to listen to it or not, right? And so
Yes.
that's hopefully something that people get out of the retreat is being able to understand where the sticking points are, and that's usually due to a lack of expression. And that lack of expression will eventually turn towards anxiety or depression or sadness or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
But I dig it. So, what was the biggest thing that you have taken away from doing the retreats?
So I've had like two retreats and two major, I think, just belief changes that really profoundly kind of happened. So for me, there were a couple core beliefs that I've always sort of had that I think have held me back, have certainly caused me a lot of suffering, have caused me to kind of make some, you know, decisions in my life or coping mechanisms that really didn't allow me to kind of have the courage to seek my full potential or seek my own direction. So I think that, after the first one in Cabo, I remember again coming out of it feeling like different, but not really being able to kind of articulate what happened, but just feeling like, again, kind of like in a metaphysical sense, like a little bit of a lighter human. I was able to kind of take, I think, a lot of what I learned, and we worked together to help appropriately like grieve with my father's death and let go of some of the baggage. But it was like very profound after, I think it was 9-10 months afterwards. I was doing like
Yeah.
a zone 2 cardio, and a song came on that was on my Gauntlet playlist. So the way that I would run the gauntlets is I would do each round would be one song on repeat for that entire round. And this
Okay.
was one of the songs I would use to like bring my fight, because it reminded me of a lot of pain, anger. It reminded me of, my marriage, my ex-husband. There was a lot of like trauma associated with that. And so I'm on this treadmill and that song comes on, and I immediately, like, instead of feeling like all those negative emotions, I was overcome with like, I smiled, like the biggest smile. I had this like joy and hope. And I immediately was like, I am a totally different human. I would never, ever be in an abusive relationship ever again. I would never let somebody treat me that way. And the next thoughts were like deeper beliefs that said I didn't deserve to be treated like that, and I deserve joy and happiness. And those were core beliefs that I had been carrying around forever, limiting, I think, who I was. So to all of a sudden have this moment where the only way I can describe it is that it felt as though every cell in my body now understood this new truth was like incredible. Like I remember like just being filled with so much joy. And that, kind of carried into the way that I presented myself. So I was starting to make changes in my life. It allowed me to start believing in myself that I can change my external environment. I can influence how people treat me. I have this, agency over my life. The
That's
second
all.
one was so similar, and I think it was in the same time frame, like this 9 to 10 month time frame after the second one, where this time I was doing just like a zone 2 on a Stairmaster. And another song came on that was from like the beginning when we first started just doing the nasal breathing walks. And this song had like made me really sad in the beginning. It's about like unconditional love and protection. And when I
Okay.
used to listen to that song, I would vividly picture myself as a little girl being sad. And I was very disappointed in myself for not showing up for her. So I wasn't loving and protecting myself. And when I would hear that song a couple years ago, like when we first started this, it made me really sad that I spent all this time being so mean to myself. And I heard it this time, and again, like same thing. I got this like huge smile on my face, and I was just suddenly filled with just love and hope. And I said, I've been showing, and I had a picture of myself again, but my like younger self was smiling. I know this sounds like super hippy dippy, but it's true. Like, and I'm like an analytical person, so it's like it's really wild. But I
That's what makes it
pictured
better.
I I again just had that image of myself as a little girl, and this time I was actually smiling, and it was like my whole body knew that I'm showing up for myself. I'm being kind for myself, like that acceptance of who I am is there. Like the self compassion is there, and
Right.
that's again something I remember the very first time you and I talked, and I told you like the full story. Your first question to me was, "Where's the self compassion? Like, where's the self love?" And I was like, "What
Yeah.
do you mean? What is that?" And like now, again, like now I, it's there. That the negative self talk is for the most part gone. If it starts like peaking up, like I kind of know to recognize it early. I feel like I have the tools to question it and change it, or I look at, external situations to see like what I can do different. But that I'm not mean to myself, like that I'm finally being kind to myself, which is
So
incredible.
I love it. That's
It's
beautiful.
just,
And you're an extremely analytical and rational human. So that's why, for me, it makes me feel like I'm not that crazy, because I always feel a bit crazy when I talk about this stuff. Essentially, in the way that I see it, and kind of what I talk about, and when we first started working, I said, this is going to take time, because you're not, it's not just changing kind of like the cognitive brain and what it's thinking. You're having to change how cells are reacting to stress and triggers. And so, something as simple as somebody saying a rude comment or cutting you off in the car, these are triggers that at a cellular level require an action. And so they're just, again, they're belief systems that are continuously compounding and building up. And so if you don't ever take that expression side and keep building that expression, which takes a lot of energy for the full body to change, it's going to go back to what's comfortable. And what's comfortable happens from very aggressive events, right? So meaning events that at that moment in time were extremely overwhelming. And so that could be when you were a little girl, and maybe, whatever happened, your dad yelled at you, or your mom, or a friend, your brother, whatever happened, that was so overwhelming that it changed how you have observed and behaved in the world from that point. And so doing music, again, the audio part has a lot to do with it. And then having the movement take place, what you're doing is you're changing how the muscles are reacting to stress and triggers. And so, again, like when you say it, every cell of your body, you're able to change how the body is going to interact with the world. And so, that little girl at that point, you were able to see a different perspective, because maybe, you know, you, from the initial perspective that you had, that initial perception was, holy cow, they're yelling at me, and therefore I'm not worthy, or I don't deserve the love. And maybe from their perspective, like I see this with my kids, where the other day, man, my youngest one did something, and I reacted out of nowhere, and I was like, oh, and he started crying. I was like, I'm so sorry, because I was like, oh no, I know
yeah,
the problem this can cause later on in life. Shit. And so I was like, I'm sorry. No, 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 no. So I was trying to get him to see the whole picture. I think he grabbed something of mine, which wasn't what bothered me, but he started to run to a street where there was cars. And so like, that's what freaked me out. But for him, he's like, and so it threw him for a whole loop. So again, it's gaining a new perspective, or gaining like a broader picture to be able to see the whole forest, rather than just being stuck on seeing the trees. And so that's the change that takes time. But we need the physical intensity to compound on itself, so it can start to change how the cells behave. But it's cool to see the changes that have taken place in the last 3 years, for sure. Yeah. So anywho, whew, that got emotional.
yeah,
So come join us, guys. Um,
yeah.
I think that's a great place to stop. I think that we can always have lots of conversations, and we'll have to have you on for another one. If there was anybody out there that was thinking about coming to a retreat, what's something that you could tell them for, and what would you have them prepare before they showed up to one of the retreats?
Yeah, I mean, if there's somebody that's thinking about it, I would say definitely do it. Because even if you don't have something, I think, specific that you feel like you're trying to accomplish, I think that's actually better, because you can sort of be guided towards maybe a particular direction. Or I think some things might pop up that you don't necessarily expect, which is good.
Yeah.
I think in terms of preparation, it's, I kind of think the first one was good in terms of not knowing what to expect. But the second, it's helpful to kind of know what you're in for. So, yeah, that's a tough one. I think the only thing I would say is be prepared to and start trying to be aware of your body and what it's telling you. So, what is making your shoulder hurt, or what are the circumstances that when your back flares up, or just try. I think to have that like body awareness
Yeah.
so that you can maybe translate some of the things a little bit easier, maybe would be helpful.
And
Yeah.
if worst comes to worst, we'll drink some wine in a beautiful place, you know?
Yeah. Get to know some great people and yeah, excellent wine,
Well,
excellent company. Yeah.
yeah, we'll have a good time. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for jumping on, Jody, and we'll keep on rocking on. Thanks for listening, guys.
Thank you.